Good morning, and thanks so much for tuning in. You're watching Trade Talk on BQ Prime. My name is Alex Matthew, and happy Friday to you. Happy Friday to you, Hiral Dadia.
Wish you the same, Alex, and a very good morning.
Good morning. Well, let's take you through what you need to know just a few minutes, or rather half an hour before the start of trade, the last trading day of the week. We had a bit of a slip yesterday, and that was par for the course because of the kind of breathless run that we had at the high point yesterday. Hiral, we were just about 110 points away from all-time highs, and then we slipped quite sharply towards the end of the session. And the market breadth also turned quite significantly midway through the trading session. So you had just about 12 gainers on the Nifty 15 trade yesterday. Among the losers, you had Kotak Mahindra Bank, which we will speak about in more detail in just a bit. But the indications as things stand, because of a positive handover globally, it seems to be that it's going to be a positive end to the week for the Indian equity markets here.
Absolutely. From a weekly perspective, yes, because it's 3 days of gains that we've already seen in terms of the markets. And yesterday is where we saw profit booking come in, but that was absolutely in the fag end of the session in the last couple of hours post the MPC. Now, what analysts are indicating also, Alex, is from a market perspective, the commentary with regards to the inflation is something that the markets have not really taken well, and that's the reason why we did see some bit of a selling pressure.
To make that point, 5.1% for the whole of financial year 24. But the RBI governor cautioning that perhaps in the second half of the year, you could see some upward pressure on inflation, which I think is what market players are a little uncomfortable with.
Absolutely. So overall with this as well, if you see the bank nifty, now that is something which is missing the participation, and we've been discussing this throughout the week. So overall, the way the bank nifty performs is going to be interesting to watch out for.
Let's in fact talk about the levels, the key levels. Yesterday you saw quite an increase in the PCR as well, several technical indicators pointing towards that bit of correction, that bit of movement downwards for the benchmark index. But what are the key levels to watch now?
So overall, if you see from the levels that we are tracking right now, yes, there is that bullish undertone which is there, but currently, from a longer term perspective, there is the slight bit of weakness that has started to creep in, because as long as Nifty is now trading below that 18,725 mark, the correction could continue, and that's what we're picking up so far. And it could slip towards levels of around 18,600 to around 18,550. Now, if you see in terms of Bank Nifty as well, the support is positioned at around 43,700, and that is something which could be breached as well in today's session. Now, overall, the risk reward is not seeming absolutely favorable so far, so watch out for that aspect. And clearly from an F&O perspective, if you see in terms of the put OI, highest is at around 18,700 strike, which is then followed by 18,600. And on the call side, you're seeing highest at around 18,700, followed by 18,800. So this gives you a fair range that we should be watching out for. But clearly, the underlying tone, there is positivity, but it seems that Bank Nifty is going to be the spoiled sport from here on for some time at least.
Speaking of spoiled sports, in trade yesterday as well, one of the spoiled spots was Kotak Mahindra Bank, and it ended lower by about 2.65%. It was the biggest contributor on the downside to the Nifty 50, and that indeed is a stock that we would want to begin with today. Sajid is joining in with the latest. Morning, Sajid. The Canadian Pension Fund is looking to sell stake. That's the latest update. But what are the key details here?
Yeah, so the CPBIB is one of the oldest investors in Canadian in Kotak Mahindra Bank. They came in around 600, 700 levels in 2013, and since then they've been gradually increasing their stake. Even last year, they offloaded nearly 2% and at 1,700 rupees or so. Today, it's likely to sell another 1.7% in open market through a block deal, and that's at the price of 1792 to 1886, which is up to a 5% discount to Thursday's closing price. Now, Kotak Mahindra Bank, if you look at the stock price, how it's faring, it's been underperforming the markets for last 3 years, and that's something which could be one of the concerns why CPBIB may be pairing his stake. Though CPBIB is sitting on a high return on this stock, but for the last 3 years, the stock has been underperforming the index, as well as the underperformance has widened in the last 1 year or so, and that's could be one of the reasons why there is some pressure on the Kotak Mahindra or investors offloading some of the stake there. So if you look at the tracking of this company, nearly 24 of the 42 analysts tagged by Bloomberg have a buy rating. Consensus price target is nearly 14% higher than the current market price. And since and we've seen some run up happening from year to date, nearly 8 odd percent it has gone up, and there it has outperformed the Sensex. But over a long term period of 1 to 3 years, it's underperformed the benchmark Sensex.
Right, and overall, Sajid, last couple of trading sessions as well, you're seeing absolute pressure mainly on Kotak, which is actually pulling the indices lower. But the other banks are not that bad so far.
That's right. So Nifty Bank has outperformed the entire amongst all other benchmarks, and that's been led by PSUs and private sector banks, as PSUs especially, because PSUs have outperformed the private sector banks in the last 1 year or so because of the improved asset quality which they have, and now expanding NIMs are almost at a peak for them, with some more expansion left. The street is divided whether NIMs will expand further for them or not. But the thing is that the credit quality is good, provisioning is lower, and there's a credit cycle which is picking up, which will be which will benefit PSU banks. So overall, it's Nifty Bank has performed well. If you compare it with Kotak, it's almost doubled, in last 3 years. So and Kotak hasn't moved much,
Absolutely. So it's more going to be like a PSU versus a private bank kind of a move from here on that we need to wait and watch. So that's going to be a space that we will be watching out for. But apart from that, Alex, you have the OMCs that have been in focus over the last couple of trading sessions. A lot of buzz in terms of what the OPEC would be doing. We heard of Saudi Arabia who's going to cut, the output in the month of July in terms of production. Apart from that, now we already are starting to see pressure in yesterday's session. What is it that's causing pressure in terms of crude, and how is it expected to impact the Indian companies?
Well, yesterday, as you pointed out, very topsy-turvy session for the oil commodity. You saw it fall quite dramatically. Brent crude falling as much as 7% at one point to fall to around $73.65 to the barrel. And that was because of certain news reports that came out of West Asia, some from Israel as well. The Israeli paper Haaretz pointing out that there is a possibility that Iran as well as the US are nearing an interim deal, a nuclear deal. Remember, that was called off by the Trump administration. And if at all a deal is struck in any form, it is expected that the sanctions that have been placed on Iran and the oil production and export from Iran, that to a certain extent would get pulled back. And Iran, if you weren't aware, is one of the largest producers of oil in the world. It has one of the largest reserves, about 10% or thereabouts of the known global reserves of oil. So if that oil supply, Hiral, starts hitting the market, then you could have a situation where the Saudi production cut won't have a bearing. Already, Citigroup has said, according to a Bloomberg report, that the cuts in production that will come about from that Saudi announcement is not going to have much of a bearing because of the poor demand scenario that is being witnessed in various parts of the world.
Right, so absolutely, the OMCs have been under pressure in yesterday's session. Let's see what happens today, whether that cut continues. And your paint companies are probably going to shine again. So the likes of an Asian Paints, Berger, these are names that will be in focus in today's session. But apart from this, an interesting aspect that we were discussing, Alex, offline as well, was clearly with regards to the changes in terms of what NSE has said, that they've submitted a consultation paper which says that non-FNO stocks should be excluded from Nifty Next 50. Now, a couple of names that appear over there, which could be impacted are a DMart, for that matter, of Varun Beverages, Zomato, and these are names which are in focus as well.
And they've lost ground recently, Varun Beverages particularly.
Absolutely. So, in fact, DMart, now that's an interesting one because now there has been an upgrade that has come in by a Motilal Oswal on a DMart. Monal joins us with more. Monal, overall, if you see in terms of DMart earnings, the same-store sales growth has been a concern for them, but they have been able to actually protect their margins. In spite of this, you have a Motilal Oswal which has come and upgraded at the counter. What is it that is making them bullish?
So again, Motilal has a couple of points which are very, very interesting and distinct. So it says that the revenues and earnings grew at a CAGR of 23 to 24% respectively. I mean, over the last 5 years, which is great because the other markets haven't been performing, like the other stocks on the counter haven't been performing quite as much. Now, the company's consistency in achieving industry-leading margins, growth, and the return on capital employed, despite having a asset-heavy model, is what is warranting its rich valuations, is what the brokerage believes. Now, the stock is trading at 30% discount to its historic multiples, which is mainly because of the weak sales growth, as mentioned, the same sales growth. Now, this is majorly due to addition of big stores that it did in the past and weak discretionary demand, which should now improve. So going forward, the brokerage believes that the same store sales growth will improve in FY24 and would boost the valuation multiples. Also, it says that it's one of the most competitive groceries in the markets right now. Despite a growing online grocery market, the share of both online and modern grocery is limited, and hence the scope and opportunity for DMart is pretty huge. It has upgraded to a buy with an upside of 18% and a target price of 4,200.
Right, so that's going to be an interesting counter to watch out for. And Alex, as we were discussing with regards to Varun Beverages as well, MK has come out with a report, a short one from a technical perspective. Now, if you see Varun, as you were mentioning, it's seen a degrowth. The stock has underperformed. But from here on, the stock is trading below its 20 DMA, and this is for the first time in the last 2 months, right? The next pivot support is where they find that is at around 1,481, and the stock is going to undergo a split in the ratio of around 2:1. So taking these aspects into consideration, they are expecting some bit of momentum in terms of a Varun Beverages. Apart from that, you have a Dixon Technologies also that will be in focus. In fact, it is one of the top gainers in trade as well. It's ended above those 4,000 levels in yesterday's session, and this is for the first time we've seen this kind of a number in 6 months. So there is that momentum building from a technical perspective on this. Short covering is what we've been seeing on the Dixon Technologies, because if you see the OI, that's gone down by around almost 14% on this counter. And in the cash segment as well, the volumes have been pretty high, right?
Yes.
So clearly, Dixon is another one to focus on in today's session. And from a sector perspective, you have the sugar counters that will be in focus. Now, if you see in terms of the US sugar price futures, they have seen an upside. So in the last 6 weeks is what we are tracking. The prices have gone up by around 3.5%. And if you see in yesterday's session, around $24.5 is where we ended. Now, if you talk about the Indian average price, we are close to pretty much in that 37, 38 kind of a range. And this is I'm talking about the wholesale. By the time it reaches retail, it goes way above 40, right? So taking this price differential into consideration, you could see a good up move that could come in terms of sugar companies as well today.
And we're trying to speak to at least one of them, so do stay tuned over the course of the day. Let me take you through a couple of other stocks as well. But before we do, in fact, there's a chart that we'd like to show you on power consumption in India. Incidentally, yesterday, it seems that India's total power consumption hit an all-time high of just over 222 gigawatts somewhere in the afternoon between 3 and 3:15 yesterday, and that's according to CMIE data. Of course, yesterday in trade, one of the top performers on the Nifty 50, in fact, the top performer was NTPC. There might have been another trigger to that, but it is a counter that ended over 3% higher. And the first of the other stocks that I'd like to talk to you about is a pair, Tata Power as well as Tata Steel, but this is more to do with Tata Power. You have the renewable energy subsidiary of the company that is going to set up a 966 megawatt round-the-clock hybrid renewable power project for Tata Steel. That project has a hybrid renewable capacity of 379 megawatts that's going to come from solar, and the remainder that will come from wind energy. Tata Steel will invest about 26% in the equity of the project, and it will be commissioned by the 1st of June 2025. So that is seen as a positive for Tata Power. The next counter I'd like to talk about is GAIL, and this is on the back of a bid that it won for JBF Petrochemicals, and that is the wholly owned, it's now become a wholly owned subsidiary. It is infused a total resolution plan amount of 2,100 crore rupees or thereabouts, and as a result of which it has added a PTA, that is purified terephthalic acid, to its petrochemical portfolio. It is involved in the production of the production process of plastic and certain other materials. But Aether Industries is the next counter I'd like to talk about. We have been speaking about this counter in the recent past. The latest update, of course, is that it has signed a license agreement with Saudi Aramco Technologies for the manufacturing and commercialization of the converged polyols technology. In case you're curious about polyols, it is used in coatings, adhesives, sealants, and elastomers. We're unaware of the implications for operations, but perhaps we'll try and reach out to the company to see what that is. And finally, IRB Infra, there's a small update on the operations side. Its toll collections for the month of May have grown as much as 20%, Hiral, compared with a year ago.
So absolutely, a lot of stocks that will be in focus. And usually where you've seen, Alex, that when the markets are in consolidation, not much happening sometimes, it's stock-specific action that comes to as a savior for the investors.
Absolutely. And in fact, on that note, that is more or less what we have on Trade Talk. It's been quite a lively session. Do stay tuned. Lots more coming up over the course of the day. And you can find all the market action starting in just a short while right here on BQ Prime.